just in case. So this is a public meeting. We do record this. It will be posted to our website. And I think that is all the housekeeping I have. So I am going to turn it over to Dr. Gifford.
Thanks, Katie. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Looks like we have a really good representation from the membership. I'm sorry I missed the site visit. I was in England on vacation visiting my son, so I got a good report from Katie and Scott. It sounds like it was a very successful visit, and thanks to those of you who participated, because I understand we really impressed the funders with the level of engagement from the board. So thanks to everybody for that. Is there any member of the public who would like to make public comment before we get into the agenda? Please raise your virtual hand if you are a member of the public that wants to comment. I do not see any members of the public. Katie, do you see anybody?
I do not.
Okay. All right, then no public comment. I will ask Katie to call the roll, please.
Definitely. So, just bring this up. So, from Department of Labor, Dante Bartolomeo.
Here.
From OAC and for Beth Buy, we have Catherine Devine.
Hello, I'm here.
For DSS, Isha Canada.
Present, I'm here.
From CCEH, Sarah Fox. From OPM, Scott Gall.
Here.
From DOC, Alalia Garcia.
Present.
From OHS, Deidre Gifford.
Present.
From CSCU, Ainsley Diamond.
Here.
From OHE, Tim Larson.
Here.
From DEMIS, Chris McClure. Joining us shortly. From the Judicial Branch, CSSD, Gary Roberge.
Here.
From OWS, Kelly Valeries.
Here.
From SDE, Charlene Russell Tucker.
I don't believe our commissioner could make it today, Katie.
Thank you for letting me know. Dr. Solik from CTEC is unavailable. From CCIC, Jen Witness.
Here.
From DCF, Mike Williams.
Here.
And from Yukon, Rica Rin, Lauren Jorgensen.
Here.
Wonderful. Thank you. We have quorum.
Great. Thank you, Katie. So we have a few things on the agenda and an hour to accomplish them. So I'm going to move right to the next agenda item. You should have received in the meeting materials the learning agenda, and Katie is going to review that. But I would first ask for a motion to adopt the updated learning agenda, and then we can proceed with the presentation and discussion. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Dante.
I'll second that.
Is that you, Tim?
Yes, this is Tim Larson. I'll second that.
Thanks, Tim. All right. So for discussion, I'll first turn to Katie, and then we can open up for the board.
Great, thank you. So the learning agenda has been shared with all of you. This is tied to both the 2019 SLDS grant and the 2023 SLDS grant. It was last updated and approved by the executive board back in 2022. And this is one of the responsibilities of the executive board to elevate and inform the learning agenda. We use this document to highlight and elevate the state policy questions and the priorities of your respective agencies. And we use it to direct data requesters who have lots of big ideas and want lots of data, but need an opportunity to refine it, make sure that the research is relevant to the agencies providing data. So I'm going to share my screen, which I meant to do a minute ago. And I will show you the. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is the current learning agenda. We had 5 topics that came out of the 2019 SLDS grant. We focused on college and career success, student readiness, financial aid, workforce training, and overcoming barriers to success. We had pretty steady data requests come in over the last few years, but they overwhelmingly fell into this umbrella bucket of overcoming barriers to success. And as we've added many more agencies, it became clear that we needed to further define what these categories are, what the priorities are, and make sure that it is inclusive of the agencies that are involved. And so you'll see that we have expanded it from 5 to 7. We still have some of the same. We still want to know about higher education, workforce development, but we've since broken them further down into families, children, and community, physical and behavioral health, education, justice, incarceration, reintegration, and housing security. I don't have the questions in a slide, but I did share a document earlier this morning that shows the 3 to 4 guiding questions that fall under each of these categories. And so while we're asking you to support and approve this learning agenda, this is an iterative process. It's not a binding document. And so as new questions come to the surface, as you are thinking about questions you have about your agencies and the people you serve, please share them with us so that we can make sure that we're promoting them to folks who are seeking data to answer their research questions. I think that is everything that I had to say about this proposed learning agenda. I hope you will support it.
Thanks, Katie. So am I correct that what the board is voting on is basically that these are the general categories of work that we want to support? And to your point, it's not a rigid document, but in general, these 7 categories would guide the data requests and the studies that are done through P20 WIN going forward?
Yeah, that's correct. So we've identified these. We've worked with the data governing board, had a couple of workshops with them, and determined that these were the most popular categories that weren't too overwhelming, that contained many questions. Not that we captured all of them, but this will drive the work, especially with the 2023 grant, where we are building a research collaborative. This will help elevate those questions to be considered.
Dante.
Thank you. Yeah, I just also want to say that one reason this is very important, and I actually made the motion to approve, is because the SLDS grant, it requires that we have a learning agenda, and that grant is incredibly important for one reason, that with the data integration hub being in the research department of, Department of Labor, we do have someone staffed from this grant that is pivotal and critical to doing this work. So the learning agenda for me is a must have, because it's a requirement of the grant that supports the work critically.
Thank you. Kelly Marie?
Thank you. I don't know how deep you want to go into conversation here, but looking at the learning agenda questions, I had a couple suggestions in there, and is this the appropriate time to make those comments?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So in the workforce development portion, it's question number 2, what are the best cost-effective programs that Connecticut DOL offers? And how to compare improving compared with other states. There are many other organizations that run effective and meaningful workforce development programs, including CT State and higher ed. There's other program providers. And so I would suggest that we broaden that, not limiting to what Connecticut Department of Labor offers. I think that's a very limiting part of that sentence.
Yeah,
So
we can
maybe
definitely
just
do that.
take that out. And then secondly, under early and K through 12 education, there is very little, if anything, around K through 12 with regards to pathway programs and dual enrollment, and dual credit, industry recognized credential attainment. And I think that's also an important component of the learning agenda.
Thanks. Those are definitely really helpful contributions. And like I said, we're still seeking questions and working with folks so that we can make sure that this is representative of our agency's questions and needs. So, you know, we can definitely, even if we approve it with these 7 categories, we can still expand on the guiding questions.
Thank you.
And we don't want them to be limiting. That's why we are phrasing them as guiding questions, just so that people don't feel like they are limited to just what is listed.
Thank you for the clarification.
Isha, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment on the expansion of the learning agenda. I like to see those new topics. And I appreciate all the questions that were sent over. I did just want to make an observation for the group, and something for consideration is considering how climate change can actually impact, the health and well-being of our families on vulnerable populations. So perhaps that's a consideration we might think about. Perhaps it's inherently in one of those topics, but something that's important that, we might want to look at as a state when in evaluating some of these outcomes.
That's great. That's a really important observation, and we can definitely add that as another category, or we can embed it within any number of those.
So just for Robert's rules purposes, Isha, do you want to propose an amendment to the learning agenda, which would be to add climate change to the 7 categories? Or do you want to just suggest to Katie that we put it as a guiding question under one of the broader categories? I think there's one that's community well-being, for example.
Yeah, I would say add it. Thank you, Dr. Gifford. I would say add it to an existing category, maybe under families, children, and communities, perhaps.
Okay.
Or, yeah.
So we can vote on the 7 categories that we have up or down, and then add the climate change to the guiding questions. Great. Kelly Marie?
Thank you. May I make a friendly amendment to also include the fact that we can make changes to the guiding questions within the categories? That would address the comments that I made earlier with regards to making some changes to some of those guiding questions.
Okay, so you want to add an amendment to the motion that would be, we adopt these 7 categories, and the board can make changes to the guiding questions in the future. Okay.
Yes.
Rachel?
Thanks so much for the opportunity just to contribute. So we developed this particular set of questions with the data governing board members. So it was a process that was a little bit ongoing. Really goes back even further than the workshops that we led back in December. So folks should just remember that like Katie said, this is a flexible and iterative list of questions. It's meant to help outside requesters understand what our priorities are as agencies with the opportunity to share data across agency lines. But you should all feel empowered to add questions at any time and to initiate requests from inside the House. So this is an expression of the state's priorities, but it doesn't have to be limited to outside requesters. And to the extent that we can partner or work with your agencies to develop internal requests, that's also the purpose of this learning agenda. So it is meant to be flexible and iterative. I keep saying guiding, but not binding. So we can revisit it quarterly if that suits folks, or we can, talk with leadership about how we can continually revisit both the questions as well as some of the work related to the questions.
Thank you. Dante.
Thank you. I just, could I ask through you, Madam Chair, to Kelly? I don't see where it said Connecticut Department of Labor, where you were saying to add other agencies. I just can't find that.
The document that I have was sent this morning, and it's on that last page where it says workforce development under the learning agenda.
Yeah, I'm looking at that.
If I might share my screen quickly.
Maybe I'm looking at an old version. I'm looking at an old version. I think.
Second question.
Yeah, that's not the version I'm looking at. Okay.
All right, so we have a motion on the table, which is to adopt the learning agenda with those 7 categories with the implicit understanding, as Rachel and Katie articulated, that the guiding questions can be changed as we go along, including those changes that Kelly Marie proposed in the discussion. Any further discussion of the motion? Okay, Katie, would you call the roll?
Sure. Dante Bertolomeo,
Yes.
Catherine Devine,
Yes, approve.
Isha Canada, Scott Gall,
I approve. I think Isha is muted, but it looked like she said approved. So.
Approved, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
thank you. Eulalia Garcia,
Yes.
Deidre Gifford,
Yes.
Ainsley Diamond,
Approve.
Tim Larson,
Yes.
Chris McClure,
Yes.
Gary Roberge,
Yes.
Kelly Valeries,
Yes.
Ajit Gopalakrishnan,
Commissioner Russell Tucker is here now.
oh, okay.
We're both a yes.
Wonderful, thank you, welcome. Jen Woodness,
Yes.
Mike Williams,
Yes.
and Lauren Jorgensen.
Yes.
Thank you. It passes.
Great. The learning agenda is adopted. Thank you. Dante, did you have a
Yeah,
comment
Deidre, before we go on, can I just, I mean, we voted on it and that's great, but can I just share what I had as part of the, as what I had on Kelly and I looking at different ones? And I just don't know, this is the one that was on what looked like today's meetings, and
So-
it's different.
So this was what I included in the board packet. These were the slides that we had put together. And then this morning I sent a consolidated Word document or PDF that has.
Oh,
all
I
the
never
questions.
saw
So
that.
it's,
So these questions are all different. Okay.
so we will just have to revisit the 2.
The question should be the same in both documents, and apologies if there's any discrepancies. We'll
Well,
double check that.
Yeah, no problem, Rachel, just they're not, because this is the second one that Kelly showed, like, this doesn't have connected Department of Labor. That's why I was so confused. I had put this was the one that I guess went out before. I did not have a chance to see a new one today. So that's fine. I'm just pointing out why I was so confused.
Thank you. Thanks, Dante, for pointing that out. And I think maybe we could ask Katie and Rachel to provide an updated, consolidated version to the extent that it's different from what Katie sent out this morning.
Yeah.
To the
Well,
to the group.
We will definitely do that.
Okay. And I thought I saw a hand, but maybe it went away. Somebody else want to say something before we move on?
That was me. I was just I'm checking the they're slightly different, I think.
Okay.
Dante's
All
right,
right.
so we'll clean it up.
Thanks, Scott. All right, so our next agenda topic is disconnected youth. Public Act 2445 mandates that P20 Win Executive Board replicate the Dalio Disconnected Youth Study. And so Rachel Leventhal-Weiner from OPM is going to talk us through this process. Rachel.
Thanks so much. So Katie, I think we have a couple of slides just to display to let folks know both about what's expected, what's been outlined, our plan, and what's happened so far. So folks, I think at this point are pretty familiar with the study. If you haven't read it in detail, we're here to summarize some of the things that are summarized in the study. So Public Act 2445, as Dr. Gifford said, states that the executive board shall submit an annual report on disconnected youth using data from the request that BCG and Dalio submitted, request 43. And in the report, they recommend that an update should include an overall count of at-risk and disconnected young people and breakdowns by key demographics and subgroups. So just to give you a high-level overview of how the data from P20 Win were used in the report. So we've been in internal conversations among participating agencies just to think about a little bit about what we're going to do to replicate it. So on the next slide, there were data that were requested from a number of agencies, the State Department of Education, Department of Labor, Children and Families, Mental Health and Addiction Services, and the Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness. And so there were a couple big analyses that were presented in the report. The one that's receiving the most attention is the one of the number of disconnected and at-risk youth. And that was calculated using State Department of Education and census data. And then there's a section where the report sort of summarizes some of the educational attainment and wage discrepancies between those who have high school diplomas and those who do not, or different stages or levels of disconnection. And that was an analysis of State Department of Education and Department of Labor data. And then there's a section where they look at those who are in the State Department of Ed data and some of the contributing factors that might impact disconnection. So they look at level of engagement with children and families and child welfare allegations, any support or receipt of mental health and addiction services, and housing security. So the report does a number of things, and different data sets are linked together. So as a group, we were trying to sort of consider what is the next best step in order to replicate this report, because we received this information just at the end of session. The report is expected by January 1st. And so on the next slide, what we have reflected on and decided is that the most important thing to continue with is the replication of the count. That first analysis of State Department of Education and census data. We've already been in discussions with Ajit and team just to think a little bit about how to replicate that count in the same way that Dalio and BCG did. And that's achievable by the January 1st deadline and expectation. But at the same time, what we want to do is initiate a data request that was similar to the one that BCG submitted and include now some other agencies that couldn't be included at the time because they weren't full participants yet in P20 WIM. And those include the Department of Correction and Judicial Branch Court Support Services Division. And then we'll actually work as a team concurrently as we work to meet the January 1st deadline to match all of those data together to create a much bigger matched data set. And in doing so, we'll be able to explore different kinds of questions, not simply account or the factors, but maybe even explore statistical relationships between things and start to explore some of the things that are unpacked in the recommendations for the report. So right now, our plan, like I said, is to replicate the count, and that meets the requirements outlined in statute, and it also meets the expectations that the report outlines. But we think that there's a deeper analysis that could be conducted. And on the next slide, we want to just we want to really ask the group for anything that you might be interested in exploring. So the report addresses one big question, who are these young people? And what are some characteristics of the young people? So they establish some kind of foundational information around disconnected and at-risk youth. But there are probably other questions that the report brought up for folks in this group or for folks on your staff or maybe in your communities. And we really also want to dovetail the work that we're doing here with the focus in the report on funding effective programs, which is a big thrust of the work that we're doing on the data and policy analytics team, thinking about using research and evaluation to actually fund what works. So we're curious to know, based on some of the information that we're presenting here, if you have other questions that you have as a result of reading the Disconnected Youth Report, and how we want to make sure to incorporate some of those into the data request and data match that we do at the same time that we work on replicating the report. And this is a good time to discuss it, or we could also keep the door open for future conversations if folks want to meet separately outside of this bigger group. That's our plan so far. And Commissioner Bartolomeo, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So first I would say that, I actually love and was so excited that this report came out again, because we had been using and working off of one that was 2014, right? So we were really kind of craving some updated information, and I appreciate that. And I say that just because I really see the value in this report, and I'm sure there are so many more questions that we could think of and issues that we would like to look at. But realistically and logistically, I just want to ask, how are we thinking that we can grow what we look at in the report and other questions we can answer beyond what they've asked of us in the legislature? Because they did not provide any funding in that bill or with that bill, and resources are, this is a big ask, right? A big task. That first report took a very long time and a lot of resources. So while I think that we really have a lot we would crave knowing, I think just the basics of the report is a bit of a lift, quite a heavy lift, actually, resource wise. Do we have a plan to go back next session, trying to get funding to further this bill and this law? Or I mean, just because, our agency is doing all that data integration stuff, and we've got the one person from the SLDS grant, but the rest of it is very tough to manage.
I can't speak to the funding piece. I'm going to speak to the first one about what else can we do in the report. And then Scott is going to jump in when I'm done with that, maybe. But what we explore is really guided by the things that your agencies believe are priorities. So the report helped establish a lot of baseline information that in many ways, we all suspect, but maybe didn't have some sort of quantitative evidence of the relationships between who has touch points with different agencies and what their disconnection from schooling and employment look like. So every agency is going to have a little bit of a different priority. So I think the big data match is really the heavier lift, Commissioner. And I think that that's the piece that we aren't going to say that we can do by January 1st, but there wasn't a full big data match amongst all of those data sets for this report. And I think the heaviest lift really was initiating this data request, including this many agencies, and working through the legalities the definitions and the governance related to actually executing a request like this. We've done it now, so we've learned a lot, and I think that we're able to execute on the foundational fact. And I see Commissioner Russell Tucker's hand raised. And then I think that really what we decide to do we focus on the folks that have all of the touch points? Do we focus on the folks who are, lightly at risk, but not the most, the sort of multi-agency users? There's lots of ways that we could approach that expansion of the analysis. So I think that's the piece where we really need guidance from agencies around what you're focused on. The funding for that piece is really, that's a separate discussion that Scott will probably have to address.
Thank you.
I don't know, Scott, do you want to say something, or Commissioner Russell Tucker, do you want to jump in? And I see you
So-
also, Jen.
Yeah, no, I'll jump in, and I'm probably going to tee Ajita, who is so close to this. And likewise, everybody's done a brilliant job of marketing this report. Like, there's a lot out there. You can't turn around without knowing the information's out there. I'm always clarifying that's not 119,000 students, because that's what folks say to me a lot. So we're always clarifying that. But Rachel, you were talking about really getting close to that data point, so we really can be focused on what it is that we're solving for and knowing exactly what the data are telling us or not telling us.
Absolutely.
As a part of that work. And so I know Ajit, we've been looking at that as well, because from our end, right, really important that we're checking to see where kids are and, transition points. Those are the report call out chronic absenteeism, right, which we can know also that because you were chronically absent here doesn't necessarily mean that the pipeline led you straight to disconnection because of the interventions and things that we're putting in place. So that's a part of that as well that we need to work on. But I'll just offer this to Ajit just to share some of the other things that we're just not uncovering, but just processing to help us really think about what our points of entry are. And I think it works across all our agencies as well, Rachel, to the point that you were making. So Ajit.
No, absolutely, Commissioner. And I think that was kind of the discussion we had when the Data Governing Board sort of had a site discussion during the federal site visit. And I shared at that meeting that, and Rachel sort of alluded to this in the opening slide, that the 119,000 number is a combination of SDE data and census data. And when they look at census data, and this was something we learned after multiple discussions with the vendors too, that on the SDE side, it includes students who are either chronically absent or are behind on the credits or have suspensions. And, doesn't mean that they don't end up graduating. I think the link between attendance and graduation was stronger prior to the pandemic. And after the pandemic, there was a high rate of chronic absence, like almost 20%, and even higher in high school. But the graduation rate is still around 88%. Statewide. So I think the interventions sort of and supports to keep kids in school are working. And then when you look at the census side, you also see that the disconnection numbers includes people with college degrees, associates, bachelors, and masters, and professional degrees who are not in the labor force for whatever reason. We don't know the reason, but who are not in the labor force. So sort of trying to tease out like who is in this 119,000? What are the interventions and supports in all our agencies that are already in play? And
Right.
then trying to say, where are the gaps that we can actually make sure we target to address this issue? So we're going to update the 119 number using the same method that was done previously so that we can replicate it, but we also want to make clear where that's coming from, because I don't think that's well understood right now. Where are the 119,000? And so we want to sort of make that transparent as well.
And to your point, Commissioner Russell Tucker, we want to be really careful because we actually did have to reach back out to Dalio and the Boston Consulting Group to talk with them about their methodology and approach. And we want to make sure this number is everywhere. So we don't want to discredit anyone. We don't want to, we also don't want to put too much of a shine on or take the shine off of whatever the statistic is. But we also know that there's deeper work that can be done to explore all the connections between state agencies. It has to be around questions that are submitted or are under consideration at the agency level, because we also aren't going to make recommendations that we can't otherwise execute on. So that's really helpful from both of you. I see Jen and Kelly both have their hands up, and I want to be mindful of time. So Jen.
Well, I'm just wondering, there were a lot of recommendations that have come out of this report about what to do about this disconnected youth, but have we looked at, and do we have the power to look at why similarly situated individuals haven't ended up as disconnected youth? Because I feel like, SDE has a lot of programs, there's higher ed is effective, financial aid is effective, like there's current government programs that may need to be expanded to help reduce the number of disconnected youth rather than creating new programs, you know what I'm saying, that haven't necessarily been proven effective. And I just think that as we go through this again, it would be helpful to look at students that are not disconnected and what sort of interventions may have come into play that were effective.
And I think that's where a deeper statistical analysis can really come into play, looking at a comparison group, thinking about, what if there's been any policy changes over time. I think that there's a lot of opportunity to expand the depth of what's been done already, then without disrupting the impact that the report is making. So, but again, what we explore and what we compare is guided by the conversation here. So that's a really helpful point, Jen. Kelly.
And not to belabor the conversation, but I completely agree with the words that Ajit had mentioned around understanding the root causes and what the data is really telling us, and looking at what are we currently doing and what structurally do we need to do differently, because we talk about programs all the time, and we can just write a program to do that, but a program doesn't always address the root causes of the structural issues that cause, dislocated youth. So looking at that, saying, what programs are most effective? Preventions are probably even more effective, finding the preventions and the programs that actually, address what happens to them after they are considered opportunity youth. So I do appreciate us looking, more deeply into what the data is telling us where we need to go. So thank you for that.
Great. Thanks so much for all of the feedback. And we remain available. We'll be providing updates to the Data Governing Board around the status of this item through Katie and Scott. So please feel free, if after the meeting things come up and you have follow-up questions or concerns, you can reach out to me or Katie or Scott with any of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks to the board members for their input. Scott?
Sorry, 2 mutes. Just to quickly address the point that Commissioner Bartolomeo raised, we are definitely acutely aware that the legislature did not allocate the resources required to undertake this analysis, and are looking to identify resources and scope it in a way that's kind of manageable. I will add that in particular, we cannot underestimate the importance of the members of the executive board supporting and providing the reminder to folks that this work requires resources, and so it's a critical role for the executive board itself to sort of provide leadership on that front, and we're really grateful for it, and we'll continue on the side to try and figure out ways we can do this or identify resources to enable it. So definitely 100% agree.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is security and architecture recommendations. We've received recommendations from the operating group with options to improve the P20 WIN system. An informal recommendation was included in everyone's packet, and the formal resolution was shared with everyone earlier. We are joined by Leah Teiderman and Omar Alibola, sorry if I said your name wrong, from Data Integration Support Center, who supported development of the recommendation. And they are on hand for any questions. So Scott and Katie, why don't you go ahead and review the process that the operating group and the Data Governing Board participated in and the recommendation itself, and then I will ask for a motion to approve it.
Sure. Okay. So I will share my screen again. We worked with, so at the December executive board meeting, we announced our partnership with DISC, and how we were going to evaluate and look into look into how the system is working. So, we have the learning agenda that we just approved. We have the disconnected use report that we will have to address. And so we want to make sure that any changes we make are in alignment with recommendations that we've received from DISC, from DALIO, BCG, the Connecticut Opportunity Project, on opportunities to be more responsive. So we know that it takes too long to fulfill a data request, and we want to make sure that we are automating where we can, limiting human error where we can, and making sure that as we add new agencies with more complex data and have an ever-growing volume of data requests, that we can actually respond to them. So the rationale we have is that we want to reduce manual processes. We want to make sure that data is moving as little as possible to fulfill a data request. And we want to simplify and modernize this system using the cloud architecture that is recommended in the recommendation and resolution that was shared with you earlier. So since we partnered with DISC, we have conducted a security assessment, focus groups, interviews with individual data governing board members, as well as data users, to get feedback on what this system should look like. And so overwhelmingly, we heard that we need to accelerate the timeline and the process for requests, matching, review, and release of data, that we need to relieve some of the stress and effort of our contributing agencies. So if we can automate these processes, improve access controls, use modern tools, hopefully that will help. And then find ways to be able to replicate data requests. So this disconnected use report will need to replicate year over year. And so we need to have a system in place that allows us to hold some data persistently that is not identifiable, so that we can recreate these data requests in a secure way, so that we are not starting from scratch every single time. We haven't updated the system in 10 years, so it seems like now is as good a time as any. And we have other options to participate in cross-state regional data collaboration, looking at different use cases with post-secondary and wages. And I think that's probably enough background before we get do you want, Dr. Gifford, should I go through the board resolution too?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we came out of a working session with the data governing board with a resolution. And so we are asking for your support and endorsement so that we may develop policies and procedures for a hybrid cloud solution. So this would combine federated and centralized models. So right now, data remains with the agency who collects it. That would not change. But the centralized piece of that would mean that as a data request is approved, data can be uploaded to a single location that can be used for matching, analysis, and storage for the duration of a data request. We would like to, again, reduce the movement of data. So this environment would allow for matching in a separate partition from analysis and where data is moved, to, again, stress the security and confidentiality and privacy of the data that you all contribute to data requests, to give agency authority and control over how data is used. So if you upload data for a request, you have the ability to create permission-based access to agency staff, researchers, and others. And then we can audit and track movement. So we can ensure that the data being analyzed is meeting the requirements of a data sharing agreement. We can better utilize controls and who can access data and when. If it turns out somebody is using data in the way that it does not meet the data sharing agreement, we can immediately restrict access. This will also help us improve the matching process so that we can accelerate the movement of data for data requests. It will also help data quality and then allow agencies to manage updates to a central cloud-based repository, reduces movement of data, complies with all relevant agencies, P21 state and federal policies and procedures. So we have many questions. We have lots to explore, and we hope we can have your support to move forward in exploring these.
So thanks, Katie. I think I understand board members may have questions about this, but I think we're looking for a motion to adopt this resolution. Oops, can you put it back up?
Yeah, sorry.
And then we'll have discussion. Tim, are you moving adoption or do you have a comment?
No, yes, I am, Commissioner. I would move adoption of the resolution.
Moved. Is there a second?
I second that.
This is Nisha.
Seconded by Isha Canada. All right, now we will go to discussion of the resolution, and thanks to the Data Governing Board and OPM for all the work with DISC to get this moved forward. Tim? Or was that still your hand from the motion? Or do you have
I'm trying to take my hand down, but it's not
Okay.
working. But I do
Dante?
have one question.
Oh,
and I
okay,
am-
go ahead. Go ahead.
I am in
Dante.
complete agreement of it, and I'm just wondering what is involved with, is this a collaboration with all of the prospective agencies, and is there funding available for the development? Or is that to be determined? That's my question, I guess.
We do have funding through 2 grants that we've received. So part of the Workforce Data Quality Initiative grant that was awarded to the Department of Labor. A part of that grant is specifically geared towards funding the creation of a secure data enclave like this. We also have funding available in the 2023 SLDS grant to support this development. And we do hope that all participating agencies will contribute and participate in this process as we figure out what this system should best look like.
Thank you.
Dante?
Thank you. I have one question and one statement. So the question, and I didn't think of it before, could have asked Patrick, but in the federated system, after all the matching is done and the information is compiled, the original data, I believe, is destroyed. With combining the federated and the centralized, would that still happen, or would that data be retained?
We would retain that piece where once the data has been matched, the PII would then be destroyed. We want to make sure that, so there's one piece that we are entertaining that is the persistent linkage of matched data, which would potentially have all agencies upload their PII once, and we would match it and create a master crosswalk and then destroy all of the PII. That way you don't have to move identifiers for every single data request. Like the match will have been done. You've only moved that data once, but we're still exploring how this can work. Approval of this resolution will allow us to figure out what would work best for all of our agencies. We still have a lot of questions about how that would work.
Okay, thank you. And then the thing I just kind of wanted to make as a statement is, sometimes government is, kind of accused of not doing things well when we all that are in here understand the limitations of the work that we're doing and the resources and all of that. And so when this report came out, I actually had some folks from a couple of the nonprofits that were involved and others who were interested, and the criticism of the slowness and the process for P20 Win that was brought out by Boston Consultant Group, I just wanted to say I really think was unfair, because P20 Win was developed 10 years ago as kind of a way to solve the problem of our challenges of sharing data across agencies. And it's been doing exactly what it was created to do. And it wasn't created to do anything more or where we're even necessarily going with it. So the progress that we're making and looking at, this resolution and the improvement is fabulous. But I just think that those of us who are involved in P20 Win should be confident pushing back on folks who have criticized the P20 Win process and its clunkiness and its slowness and all of that, because it's been doing exactly what it was designed to do.
Thank you, Dante. Jen. Is that you, Jen? Your raised hand is obscuring your face on my little teeny screen, but I think that's you. There you go.
It is. My internet's a little unstable, so sorry if I freeze. Dante, I agree with everything you just said, and I just don't think folks understand the complexities of creating that data set and agreeing on the variables and that the staff time it takes for that. And so I think we need to, as a board, continue to advocate for resources for additional staff that can work on these data sets as full-time job, because I don't think the match is really the issue. I mean, DOL turns this stuff around pretty quickly, but I appreciate also Scott and Katie on your leadership to move things forward in this manner. I would just ask Katie, for some folks like the private colleges, we have specific data sharing agreements that may not align with this, may not align with being in a centralized model. And it's my understanding, Katie, there's some flexibility as we move forward in terms of who's centralized and who's federated. Do you want to just
Correct.
comment on that quickly? Thank you.
Sure. So we know that each agency has different abilities to share their data, where and for how long. And so this can be used in different ways for each agency. So if you have a data set that you're ready to share for an approved data request, or you have just a data set that you want to make available for any data request, you can upload it and have your own little bucket in this data environment. Whereas for other agencies, and we know that this is going to be a work in progress and we're not going to centralize everything, but we can do this on a project by project basis. So knowing that the independent colleges have very specific limitations for how data can be moved and stored, like this is not going to conflict with that, because we will just treat this as any other data request. The request is approved, the data set is created, it's uploaded. Instead of it moving beyond this one environment to researchers and to the Department of Labor, we're just bringing the researchers and others to this location for the analysis. And so this just is going to limit how much data is moved, and hopefully can live for some time-bound period for a data request. And then once the data sharing agreement expires or there's a specific data destruction date, access will be restricted, that data will be destroyed. So, we're going to take those requirements, those needs from agencies into consideration as we start developing this environment.
Kelly Marie.
And thank you for everyone's comments so far. I appreciate them all and agree. I might suggest, as we move this work forward, the possibility of maybe us discussing a minimum data set that would be across all of our agencies at the very minimum, so that there is some type of ability for us to do a one-to-one match. And obviously all of us create and need different levels of data, but if we have at least that minimum, we would know what we would get out of the system at that minimum level.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. We can definitely make sure that's part of the discussion.
Thanks, Kelly Marie. So we have a motion on the table to adopt the resolution authorizing OPM and the Data Governing Board to develop policies and procedures for a hybrid cloud solution. Is there any further discussion? I don't think I see any hands. Katie, could you call the roll, please?
Dante Bartolomeo,
I'm sorry, I couldn't get my mute off. Yes.
okay. Catherine Devine,
Approve, yes.
Keisha Canada.
Approved.
I see Sarah Fox has joined us. Is she still with us?
Approved.
Scott Gall,
Approved.
Eulalia Garcia,
Approved.
DJ Gifford,
Yes.
Ainsley Diamond,
Approve.
Tim Larson,
Yes.
Chris McClure,
Yes.
Gary Roberge,
Yes.
Kelly Valeries,
Yes.
Charlene Russell Tucker,
Yes.
Jen Witness,
Yes.
Mike Williams, who I think had to leave early, Lauren Jorgensen.
Yes.
Thanks,
Great.
everyone. The motion passes.
Motion is adopted. Thank you, everyone. So it's 2:58. We had two other items on the agenda that we are not going to get to. One is the jobs for the future, and the other was just an update on data requests, which Katie tells me can be deferred into our next meeting. And Kelly Marie has graciously offered to have the jobs for the future presentation at the next meeting, and she'll circulate the slides in the interim. Could I have a motion to table those two agenda items until our next meeting, please?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Moved by Tim, seconded by Gary? Is that you?
I'll
Gary?
second. Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
Seconded by Gary. Any discussion on tabling? All right, we'll just do a voice vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. So we'll start the next meeting with those two agenda items. With that, unless there are any other issues from the board, I will, yes, Tim.
Sorry, Commissioner, but I just did want to express my appreciation for Kate Breslin. She's been really dynamite. She's often taken time to pull me aside and fill me in on this stuff. I think she does a fantastic job, and I just wanted to acknowledge her in front of the group. I think she's wonderful. So thank you.
Agreed.
May I second that?
Agreed.
We all love Katie. Thank you, Katie. I sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I'm just reading words that Katie puts on a page for me at all these meetings. So that's my secret. All right. Thanks, everyone. Motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
And
Second.
second? Okay, thank
Second.
you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, everyone. 3 o'clock on the
Thank you,
nose.
everybody.
See you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.